Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back for Unit 2 Cells. Today we are going to take Lesson 7 Diffusion and Osmosis in Cells. Our objective today is to know examples of diffusion in plant and animal cells. Also examples of osmosis in plant and animal cells. What are isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic solution? The new words isotonic, hypotonic, hypertonic. Example of diffusion in animal cell. Your body cell needs food, food and oxygen for respiration. These particles, food and oxygen, are carried in the blood. When the blood reaches the cell, the oxygen and the food diffuses into the cell. Your cells produce waste and carbon dioxide. They also diffuse, but out. They diffuses out of the cell. They diffuse out of the cell into the blood. So the first example here for diffusion in animal cell is oxygen and food particles diffuses into the cell, and carbon dioxide and wastes diffuses out of the cell into the blood. Second example, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between the alveoli in the lungs and the blood. This exchange called gas exchange. Oxygen is diffuses from the alveoli, from the air in the alveoli into the blood, where the carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the air in the alveoli. So these two examples for diffusion in animal cell. Example of diffusion in plant cell. Also plant needs carbon dioxide for what? For photosynthesis process. Carbon dioxide diffuses into the leaf through the stomata found on the underside of a leaf. A leaf produces oxygen and water vapor. Oxygen and water vapor diffuses out of the stomata. Diffusion of water vapor happens much quickly in hot, dry, and windy conditions. Example of osmosis in plant and animal cell. Root hairs take in water from the soil by osmosis. Water continues to move along the cells of the root and up to the xylem, then to the leaf. All the time, water is moving to areas of lower water concentration. So, the water is moving from the soil into the roots by an osmosis process towards all other plant parts by the same process, osmosis process. What are hypertonic, isotonic, and hypotonic solution? These cells is example of animal cell. So in hypertonic, as you can see, the water is moving from the inside of the cell to outside, from the inside to the outside. Isotonic, it's like an equilibrium. The rate of diffusing outside of the cell equals the rate of diffusing of moving the water into the cell. But hypotonic, only moving from the outside into the inside. What are hypertonic? Hypertonic solution, example, in a plant cell, it becomes turgid. Turgid when the water fills the cell from the inside. Keep entering the cell from all direction, because outside here it's high water potential, but in the inside it's low water potential, so the water moves from the outside area to the inside area. But in the isotonic solution, the water potential inside the cell equals the water potential outside the cell, so it is the same from going in and out. Isotonic, it becomes isotonic solution. But in hypertonic solution, the water diffuses out of the cell. Why it is moving out of the cell? Because the water potential inside the cell is high water potential, but outside of the cell it is low water potential. So the water moves from high water potential into low water potential, which means from the inside to the outside. Here, as you can see, hypertonic solution is a solution with low water concentration or low water potential. When a cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, the water diffuses out of the cell. The water diffuses out of the cell, causing the cell to shrinks or shrivel. And a plant cell becomes plasmolized, means cytoplasm moved away from the cell wall. But in hypotonic solution, it's a solution with high water concentration or potential. When a cell is placed in hypotonic solution, the water diffuses into the cell, causing the cell to swell and possibly burst if it is an animal cell. Because the animal cell has no cell wall, so it bursts, but a plant cell becomes turgid or swelled. Isotonic solution is a solution with the same concentration of the water. Like inside and outside, they are equal in concentration. So when a cell is placed in an isotonic solution, the water diffuses into and out of the cell at the same rate. So the plant cell becomes normal as usual. Osmosis makes plant cells swell up. The water moves into the plant cell vacuole and pushes against the cell wall. The cell wall stops the cell from bursting. This is useful as it gives the stem of plants support.
Can you smell that delicious cake? Have you ever wondered why your fingers prune in water, or how plants manage to take up nutrients from the soil? All of these things require the movement of substances by either diffusion, osmosis, or active transport. In this two-part series, we're going to discover how cells take in useful substances and remove waste using these three methods of transport. The exchange of materials occurs between cells and their environment across the cell membrane. To make this exchange as efficient as possible, some organisms have evolved specialized exchange surfaces, like the alveoli in the lungs, or root hairs in plants, or the nephrons in kidneys. Depending upon what is being exchanged and which direction along the concentration gradient things are traveling, will determine whether diffusion, osmosis, or active transport will be used. Let's start with diffusion. The lovely smells of the cake spread around the room by diffusion. Diffusion is the process in which particles spread out from each other. They move from high concentration, so right by the cake, to an area of low concentration, so everywhere else in the room. In diffusion, Particles move down the concentration gradient until they are evenly distributed. For particles to move like this, they need to be a gas or particles of a dissolved substance. Diffusion is seen throughout nature and allows substances to pass into or out of cells across the cell membrane. But they must be dissolved, and there must be a concentration gradient that they can move from high concentration to low concentration. Gas exchange in the lungs, so oxygen moving from the alveoli into the blood and carbon dioxide from the blood into the alveoli, are both great examples of diffusion. Carbon dioxide moving from the air into the leaves of plants also moves by diffusion, but it doesn't have to be a gas. How digested foods like amino acids move from the small intestine into the blood also moves by diffusion. You can also have facilitated diffusion, where the movement is still down the concentration gradient, but special carrier proteins are required to enable the movement. Glucose and ions need carrier proteins to move across the membrane. Osmosis is very similar to diffusion, but just for water. It is the movement of water into or out of a cell. Again, it is the movement from a dilute solution, so high concentration of water molecules, down the concentration gradient to a more concentrated solution, so low concentration of water molecules. The water molecules move across a partially permeable membrane. Water molecules move at random, so some do go back across the membrane. But the overall net effect is that there is movement to the more concentrated side, or the side with less water, until equilibrium is reached, or until there is no net movement of water anymore. Osmosis out of a cell can cause big changes. Animal cells shrivel up, and in plant cells the membrane and cytoplasm shrink away from the cell wall, causing the cell to become flaccid. And if osmosis causes lots of movement of water into the cell, plant cells swell and become turgid. They have a strong cell wall which prevents them from bursting, whereas animal cells don't have a cell wall, and so they burst. The absorption of water by plant roots and the absorption of water in the small intestine and the colon all use osmosis. So we know all about the movement of gases and water.
Choose. When a cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, the water diffuses out of the cell. Causing the cell to shrivel or shrink. When a cell is placed in a hypotonic solution, the water diffuses into the cell, causing the cell to swell. When a cell is placed in an isotonic solution, the water diffuses in and out of the cell at the same rate, so it becomes normal. Thank you. I hope you understood this lesson. Goodbye.